Welcome back to Network Africa. Now, the United Nations warns of a looming refugee crisis in Malawi, where thousands of Mozambicans, mostly women and children, have fled violent clashes between government forces and the opposition. Some of the refugees who fled to Malawi have been sharing their stories regarding how they managed to escape clashes between government soldiers and rebels in the coal mining province of Tete.
Refugees told their stories of soldiers attacking villages they believed were harboring opposition party members and had burned down houses, in one case killing an elderly woman trapped inside her home.
I saw government soldiers fighting with civilians, and we then mobilized and started running away to reach this place.
Aid agencies are providing assistance to the refugees. Labana Stephen, an officer with the medical charity Doctors Without Borders (MSF), explains that they are also seeing malaria patients.
Most of the people, they are traveling long distances, so it's like they are sleeping in uncovered area. So most of them, you find that they are sick, affected with the malaria. Yeah, so there's a really high increase of malaria for most of the patients here.
Malawi is struggling with food shortages, a long drought, and other effects of the El Nino weather phenomenon, and a stagnant economy. But officials are trying to support the refugee families. Gift Raposo works for the local government in Mwanza district.
The majority is the children and women, so we also have put in other aspects that require psychosocial support, because these are children and women who do not have the way to survive in such a kind of a hostile situation.
Mozambique's main opposition party, Renamo, started out as a guerrilla force backed by neighboring, then Rhodesia's white minority government, and later apartheid South Africa on its southern border to counter the communist Frelimo movement. The two sides fought a civil war from 1976 to 1992 in which 1 million people died. Since then, there have been few reported outbreaks of violence in former Renamo strongholds in the southern African nation's central belt or around Tete, a major coal mining center. It's not clear what sparked the latest fighting.
Speaking of the migrant crisis, here's the latest concerning the one which the European Union is dealing with. The European Council President Donald Tusk has issued a stark warning saying that the European Union had no more than 2 months to tackle the migration crisis engulfing the 28-nation bloc, or else face the collapse of its passport-free Schengen zone.
I share the sentiment expressed by Prime Minister Rutte that we have no more than 2 months to get things under control. The statistics over the Christmas period are not encouraging, with over 2,000 arrivals to the EU per day, according to Frontex. The March European Council will be the last moment to see if our strategy works. If it doesn't, we will face grave consequences such as the collapse of Schengen. There will be no compromise on fundamental values like non-discrimination and free movement. At the same time, I will do everything in my power to find a satisfactory solution also for the British side. As of today, the result of the referendum is more unpredictable than ever before. Time is of essence here, and this is why I will work hard to strike the deal already in February. It will not be easy, but it is still possible.
The European Council President Donald Tusk. Now, with 2 months to go before the migrant crisis escalates even further, as mentioned by the European Council President, all hands certainly need to be on deck. That being said, just how significant is Nigeria's role in the migrant crisis? Now, it's important to bear in mind that Nigeria ranks number 8 on the list of top 10 countries which applied for asylum in Europe in 2015. Joining us to explain the significance of Nigeria in the migration crisis is the Managing Director for Center for Transatlantic Relations at Johns Hopkins in Washington, D.C., Ambassador Andras Simoyi. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you. Happy to hear your voice.
It's a pleasure. Now, I have to do a bit of a backtrack here. When I had the opportunity to meet you and we had that conversation talking about how significant Nigeria is in regarding the migrant crisis. I'd just like you to explain that to me and our viewers at this point.
Well, let's step back for a moment. It's not just about the refugee crisis. Nigeria is a very important country. It has a leadership role in Africa. It is internationally a country that can play and will play a very important role. There is an important element of demographics. By all accounts, in about 25, 30 years, the population of Nigeria will be 400 million, but it's also a rich country with enormous resources, but also a source of talent. So having said this, please understand, I'm trying to put this in perspective and not just narrow it down to the present crisis that we have. Also, let me just say one thing so that your viewers understand. There are three crises that are lumped onto each other. One is the refugee crisis. The second, the crisis related to terrorism, and the third, related to migration in general. The three things have to be seen in their complexity, seen and approached together, but we have to take down these targets one by one. And therefore, what I have told you, I'd like to tell your viewers, I see Nigeria as part of the solution to this challenge that we all the democracies in the world face.
So what do we need to do since we're part of the solution?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that Nigeria concentrates on strengthening its democratic institutions, its democracy, build stronger alternative economic platforms well beyond just the oil wealth that you have. And that will have a very important influence on the staying power of your people. But also, I do think that Nigeria has a very close cooperation with both the European Union and the United States, and I think that is where you have to look at your possible influence. I have been listening very carefully to the conversation with your colleagues in Kenya. It is clear that Nigeria is at the center of this issue in Africa.
Well, Ambassador, some of the steps you just recommended seem a bit longer term. That might take a while to actualize. What can we do that is immediate, considering the fact that what we just heard the European Council President Donald Tusk say in the last soundbite, that if things are not handled in the next 2 months, that it's going to escalate to a level that we might not have anticipated. So what can we do that could be more immediate than long term?
Well, first of all, I think Donald Tusk is right to sound the alarm bell. The situation is not good in Europe. But what you can do immediately, there are a couple of things you can do immediately. Of course, you're doing that, some of that already. You're stepping up your fight against terrorism. That's important, because terrorism is really one of the sources of the refugee crisis. The second is that you need to do more to make sure that migration as such is stemmed and is cooled down, and for that I think some important decisions by the Nigerian government have to be made. And then finally, I think it's important to step up the dialogue with the Europeans to figure out how you can cooperate better. Don't forget, crisis is bad, but look at it also as an opportunity for Nigeria to step onto the international stage and watch very carefully what is happening in Europe. Look, there is a danger that if Schengen goes down, that the European Union is going to disintegrate. We don't want to see that. None of our partners want to see that. So I repeat, I think it is very important that you seize the moment. Nigerian leaders seize the moment to step up to dialogue and cooperation with primarily the European Union.
Ambassador Andres Simoyi, thank you so much for joining us and for that insight. We appreciate your time on Network Africa. Thank you very much.
It's a real honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Andres Simoyi speaking with us from Washington, D.C. He is the Managing Director, Center for Transatlantic Relations at Johns Hopkins in Washington, D.C. Still to come on the program, members of the United Nations Security Council are going to Burundi later this week with 3 goals in mind. Find out what they are when we